it's very hard to predict where Russia is headed because Vladimir Putin has no plan. I think he's done very well tactically. I think the move in Syria is a brilliant use of Mr. Obama's failed policies in the region. But one of the things to understand about the Russian system is that anarchy and chaos is endemic. It is a regime that is reactionary in the extreme. He's reacting to an economy that's in tremendously fragile shape. He's reacting to the attacks on many of his colleagues, some of his closest friends who have been attacked, and he's doing it in the typical way Mr. Putin reacts. What he does is he protects his friends by taking their liabilities and having them shared among the Russian populace and making sure profits are privatized. So that's how he works. And in terms of the geopolitics of the region and what's happening, we're seeing in Syria, he is acting decisively because he feels that he has a window while Mr. Obama is president, where the United States will be impotent and inept. He feels they were that way in Libya. He feels they were that way, at least incompetent, in Iraq. And he sees this as a window. Now, the problem is Putin's entire administration has never been good at the long game. They're very good at the short game. What getting enmeshed in Syria will actually do to Russia, how much of an advantage long-term making this kind of a commitment will be, is anyone's guess. But he has a narrow window before the American election and the change of administration where he feels strong enough now in light of how the U.S. has behaved since Georgia that he can almost act with complete impunity, which is a fairly frightening position to realize.
One of your former clients, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, actually I think is making some efforts to repair the system, but you're probably following some of his political efforts. So what do you think about it? Does he stand a chance? Is he doing something dangerous, by the way, to himself now?
Have spent the last decade supporting Mikhail Khodorkovsky.
Now the trademark.
Yes. I continue to believe in him and in what he's doing, and yes, I think it's a dangerous course on a personal level, absolutely. Russia needs dozens of Khodorkovskys. Russia needs visionaries, selfless people who are prepared to take courageous stands. We need to be minting the Politkovskayas, the Khodorkovskys, the Yuri Schmidts, the Karina Moskalenko's. But Russia has an incredible natural resource of talent. One of the things I've always said about Russia is that Mr. Putin has worried and focused on the wrong resources. He's focused on fossil fuels while he's let Russia's brain drain occur at an incredible level to the benefit of Israel and the United States and many other countries. That's what he has to get right, which he's not focused on at all. It's this giant vacuum sound of Russia's intellectual and financial elite leaving the country. And that kind of drain, until that course changes, Russia faces very difficult tomorrows.
From your experience with Russia's judiciary system, in retrospect, was it the right strategy to, say, fight political cause with politics?
Firstly, you have no choice or no chance because of telephone justice. And secondly, in most of these cases, particularly if your client is in jail in Russia, job number one is keeping them alive. The most dangerous thing for any prisoner in Russia and many other countries is for them to fall into the gray mass of the anonymous. So one of the things that's very important is to not only focus on keeping that individual alive, but focus on his life, on his return out of prison. We've represented many clients in Russia, in Latin America. We just, with our Zambian team, obtained an innocent verdict for the former president of Zambia. In all of these cases, it's incredibly important to remember that a reputation is a very important thing that has to be protected even in the middle of a trial, even in the middle of a massive persecution. And if you can do that, then you really thwart the intent of the political opponent who's launched the attack. Mr. Khodorkovsky's reputation, frankly, has only been burnished through people understanding that he was the victim of a massive political and economic attack. Rupiah Banda's reputation has only been burnished by people understanding, in that case, that this was a completely political focus to disentitle him from running for office in Zambia. Nasir el-Rufai in Nigeria, his reputation was burnished when he was in exile, when we represented him and did a white paper to demonstrate that there were very odious motivations to the bogus charges that were leveled. But we're in a world now, not just in Russia, throughout the world, where there's a fixation on certain terms like corruption, which are the red mark of society, which if a politician like Putin can label an opponent corrupt or a tax evader, this stings almost worse than violent crime. So it's incredibly important, number one, for all of us to get over the hysteria on corruption and start looking at governance in a broader light. And number two, for lawyers such as myself and others to maintain the ability to fight these governments not only in the courts, but in the media, in supranational bodies like human rights courts or whatnot, so that we not only protect the individual, but we stop the governments from misusing their massive powers to affect political change through the courts. I mean, one of the big dangers in the Khodorkovsky trial was that the Russian state wanted us to behave as lawyers, because behaving solely as lawyers legitimized their activity. We had to call them out. The reason I was expelled was that I went on TV inside Russia and said that Mr. Putin had stolen Yukos. He was a thief.
And you still can't go back to Russia, right?
I still can't.
Do you want to?
Well, in light of what's happened to many of my friends, not desperately, but we work in other countries in the CIS, and obviously, having first traveled to Russia 40 years ago, yeah, I still have an interest in going back, and my life in some very important ways always revolves around what's happening in Russia.
Did it have any lasting impact?
The Khodorkovsky case historically will be viewed as one of the seminal moments of this century in Russia. The Khodorkovsky case really set the template for the thieving and raiding by those around Putin. It existed before. We saw it with the Guzinski case. But the acceleration post-Khodorkovsky is breathtaking. The level of raiding that's going on now involving business people in Russia. I often say that Stalin attempted to get rid of the kulaks as a class. We heard from Putin when he took office he was going to get rid of the oligarchs as a class. None of us expected that he was actually going to destroy businessmen as a class. But in Russia today, it is incredibly dangerous and difficult to be a successful businessman. And this massive raiding that we've seen and that I see in my practice in defending Russian entrepreneurs is absolutely a cancer that Putin is incapable of stopping, because it goes to the very structure of the Putin regime, which is that he maintains power by allowing this type of thievery and gangster type of conduct by certain arms of the state to go on. That's why Magnitsky and all of those cases like Magnitsky continue.
So do you think the Western response, say the Magnitsky Act or the sanctions, is it adequate, or would you expect anything harsh?
I don't think the West response is adequate. But number two, the West lacks political leadership and competence in dealing with not only Russia but foreign affairs, and in setting terrible examples. I mean, I'm more and more ensuring that when I speak about Russian justice, I speak about American justice and some of the tremendous problems in this country with how the United States is dealing with young blacks, for instance, or how the United States is dealing with seizure before judgment. Mm-hmm. We've had tremendous changes in the United States that really vitiate against human rights here. And while happy to focus on the problems within Russia, this is a country from a human rights standpoint that has to do a tremendous level of introspection into how we've lost so many rights and opportunities, and under the Obama administration, how the Espionage Act has been misused against journalists. I'm very active in Turkey. There are many Americans here who criticize the Turks in terms of freedom of the press, and I say to them, let's talk about the United States. Let's talk about whistleblowers. Let's talk about 30-year jail sentences for Manning.
Mr. Snowden, another whistleblower, at least that's how he presents himself. Not everybody in the government here agrees, right? He opened Twitter account, yes. Already had a mass...
With the beneficial assistance of Russia.
I mean, Russia is not really the champion of human rights now, and for a person to use the platform of this country to criticize the United States, do you think it's a bit ironic?
I believe that what Snowden did was of monumental importance to this country. I don't care where he did it. He exposed an inner state that exists within the United States that could threaten the civil liberties of each and every one of us. He is a hero. I have no doubt or issue, a selfless hero that should be brought back to this country, given an award for incredible courage. What he faced and the risks he took to try to expose the levels to which this society and government has been penetrated by those who are willing to eavesdrop on all of our most sensitive conversations without judicial process, in contrast to what the Constitution is supposed to protect us for. I mean, that man should be heralded as a hero. I think when you face massive illegality like that in a society, when you witness that level of illegality, and you have the courage to stand out, which 99.9% of us would not, I think all of that has to be weighed. I do not believe, simply because he went to Russia, probably as a last-ditch attempt to save himself from what would have been a 40 or 50-year inhumane sentence in the United States, I don't believe that should disentitle him to the respect of what he did and what he demonstrated to all of us, the impact of which President Obama has had to acknowledge. New legislation has been brought in to try to address. It was of incredible importance.